Welcome to Lead and Follow, a podcast that explores how great collaboration actually happens. I'm your host, Sharna Fabiano, author of the book Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork. And I'm pleased to bring you the latest research, insights, and learning methods to help you work together better with the people around you. I help founders, solopreneurs, and new leaders become great at collaborating because I've seen how much more becomes possible when people integrate their ideas, perspectives, and strengths in a practical way. To learn more about coaching with me and for a one-time discount on your first session, go to sharnafabiano.com/coaching and enter the promo code podcast. The link is in the show notes. And now, here's the episode. Today, I'm speaking with Lawson Herold, who's a recent alumni of Christopher Newport University's unique leadership program, which now includes a whole course on followership. This episode is actually part 2 of a 3-part series in which we're exploring the integration of followership into this leadership program, both as an academic study and also as a real-world practice. So I've really enjoyed learning how followership has been changing the perspective on leadership for both faculty and students. And after listening to this episode today, I want to encourage you to please go back and listen to part 1 if you haven't already, and also stay tuned for part 3. For now, Lawson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to share this space with you.
Likewise, I want to start by just inviting you to introduce yourself and share with listeners where you are now, what you've been doing since graduation.
Yes, so I graduated from Christopher Newport in 2021. I earned my degree in communication studies with minors in leadership studies and graphic design. So as you mentioned before, I was a member of the university's President's Leadership Program. And currently, I am a cast member at the Walt Disney World Resort in Orlando, Florida, where I am a crew member working aboard the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, which I hope to share a little bit about later. But that's what I'm up to.
We're definitely going to go into that. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to learn more, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So
Absolutely.
Let's go back to your experience with the leadership program. Mm-hmm. You were among the first to experience this followership course when it was introduced. So I'm curious what your initial reaction was when it first came up.
Absolutely. So in the context of Christopher Newport University, one of our quote unquote taglines or focuses or emphasis is on leading a life of significance. So when I came to Christopher Newport, I really had this notion that in order to lead a life of significance, I would need to hold a position of power and influence in order to mobilize a group of people to achieve something. But the more I came to realize it, it's so much more beyond that. It's not that title. It's not that position. In fact, the first moment I arrived on campus, one of the experiences in order to prepare you for the President's Leadership Program is Leadership Adventure. So it's a leadership development experience that plants the seeds to help you succeed and grow throughout your 4 years in the program. And the first discussion we had was actually on followership. So along the way, it was planted seeds throughout the program where we talked about followership, and then it eventually led to this course in followership. And what I loved most about it was, at first, I think there was some hesitancy, but with my professors, Lori Throop and Lacey Gray, they began the course really leaning into and being very aware of the perceptions behind followership and almost extending us a metaphorical invitation, where it was almost as if it was this invitation where we could step into a door. And the door was followership, if you will. So you can either step through the door frame or not. But once you step through that door frame, once we learn about followership, it's really hard to go back because it's adding more color to the gray area that exists. And that means it's adding more complexity to your relationship with leadership. And I think that was very exciting in a lot of capacity. So it was transitioning from this hesitancy to curiosity to every day wanting to learn more and more about followership, often sometimes leading so much more into resources on followership than I do leadership. Even here at the Walt Disney Company, we talk about backstage and onstage. Backstage for me is that followership, whereas onstage was that leadership.
Thank you for that. I love the picture you're painting of your personal journey there as, walking through the metaphorical door. And I want to ask you maybe just to reflect a little bit more on that theme of power and influence, because you're pointing out something really important in the cultural messaging we receive, about leadership and what it is to do anything in the world, to live a life of meaning or significance. And we associate power and influence with having that leader title. My experience is different. My experience is that power and influence is more like a phenomenon that's cultivated between the forces of leadership and followership. But I'd be curious if your perspective on those themes in particular has shifted through your education and your early work experience.
Absolutely. Especially within the followership course. It was very much how the power often resides with the followers. In addition to coming across a lot of texts throughout that course, especially some of the work of Sam and Mark Hurwitz talking about how followership and leadership have an equal dynamic and different role, really understanding that it is the same playing field. So during my time at Christopher Newport, thinking about my career choices, I wanted preparation. I wanted a practice ground to be a team player and to learn how to be a team player, whether as a leader or as a follower. I also wanted to have the language in the toolbox to pursue goals, but also to make goals. What I really wanted to do is understand people. And right now, I am in the business of pursuing goals. One of our goals, actually, we just reached it. We have just accomplished at the Starcruiser the highest guest experience scores the Walt Disney Company has ever seen in the history of Disney, which is so exciting. Thank you. Yes, I give kudos to our incredible team before me, because I began in October, because they were the ones that were truly put in that work. In addition to, I give huge kudos to our leadership team for guiding us through that. But that is a goal that I come in mind with every single day to accomplish that goal of creating an experience that truly resonates with our guests and they leave feeling so fulfilled. And so right now there is a lot of, I carry my leadership and followership books with me to and from work, because there's some experiences where I truly am like, wow, I think this is this guiding principle, or this is this behavior, and I'm curious about this. How can I navigate this? So in terms of that, I think the followership course specifically, it really has given me the toolbox to understand how to pursue a goal, how to accomplish that goal, and how to partner with my leaders in doing that, in addition to how to be an effective team player. Our experience on the Galactic Starcruiser would not happen without effective team players. And it's a team-oriented environment that is really driven by that effective partnership. So it's a really unique opportunity to take what I've learned from the followership course, from the leadership program as a whole at Christopher Newport, into the workspace.
You've had a little time to reflect on this since you finished. I wonder what is standing out to you now from that course. Maybe you can just throw out some examples of ideas or lessons that were maybe the most impactful, or things that you used a lot or you're using now, specifically in the followership space.
In addition, another thing that I learned throughout this course is understanding leader and follower not as fixed professional titles, as you say in your book again, but as strategic and empowering ways of relating to one another. It's very much a relationship, and for a relationship to be effective, it takes work. I think too, throughout my course, my undergraduate course, I've learned that effective leadership can make change intentional. But for my followership course specifically, I learned that followership can make change effective. So intention with the leader, it's about setting that frame. That effectiveness on behalf of the follower can be activated by interacting within the frame. So definitely leaning and learning more about that relationship.
That's a great example, intention and effectiveness. I wonder if you have some recent examples from your work experience where you're seeing that play out, either when you yourself are leading or following, or if you're in relationship with a coworker.
Absolutely. In my day-to-day work, I see it. I think every day we start with the intention to deliver a one-of-a-kind experience, this revolutionary experience where our guests are truly immersed in their very own Star Wars story. And it's up to me as a follower to pursue that goal and to make it happen, to make it real. It's about leaning into the relationships that I have on board to ensure that our passengers have the best experience possible.
What are some of the things you do? And, tell me, I'm kind of pushing on this because I'm really curious about it myself. What are some of the things you do to make sure your passengers have the best experience possible?
Oh, that's a great question. First and foremost, it's honoring their journey. That's what we say on board. We are honoring their journey. We have passengers that are Star Wars fanatics. We also have passengers that are new to the whole experience. And so it's really honoring where they are at in their journey and doing everything we can to make sure that it is up to their expectation and more, delivering that wow factor. In addition to, it's very much extending that empathy and holding that emotional intelligence. It's very important, especially when we're working with guests. As a team player, it is partnering with my fellow crew members, assisting them when needed.
I think those few things you pointed out are really great, subtle things that are often overlooked, but they're so crucial, important followership skills that are in some ways invisible. But if they're not there, the whole thing just doesn't work, right? In this case, you might have a passenger who walks away and thought, oh, that wasn't what I expected, or it wasn't great or worth it. And in another situation, you might have a customer or a colleague, who's like, oh, I'm not happy with this, or I'm not satisfied, or it doesn't work for me, and it's because the relationship wasn't there. It might not even be because the product isn't a good one, right? It sometimes relies on the dynamic. So I think that's really wise of you to point out. I imagine in the Star Wars experience, there are other instances of leading and following dynamic that might be occurring. And I wondered, because you have this lens, right, from your study, what are you seeing, it, to the extent that you're allowed to disclose it, that might be illuminating for listeners?
So to provide context to exactly what this experience is, it's a first of its kind 2-day, 2-night immersive adventure where you get to live your very own Star Wars story. I say Star Wars lightly because, I say Star Wars lightly because your knowledge of Star Wars is not integral to the experience. So I mentioned honoring your journey. So what happens is you would arrive at a terminal here at the Walt Disney World Resort, board a launch pod, and then you would head up to the magnificent Halcyon Starcruiser, which is a galactic Starcruiser, where you'll have the opportunity to stay in a cabin or a suite with a beautiful view of space from your very own cabin. And then throughout the ship, you'll be interacting with a eclectic collection of characters, sit down to enjoy galactic cuisine, and perhaps even plot a secret mission or two.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yes. So as a crew member, I am a part of a team that plays an integral part of the experience for passengers from the point they arrive for their voyage until the day of disembarkation. Starcruiser, when done well, and we do it well, I like to think so, it truly makes real the idea that you get farther by going together. Teamwork is literally built into the experience, both as a passenger and as a crew member. As a passenger, there are things that you cannot do alone to accomplish something. And there are moments where the choices you make have impact on others. We have a saying on board that our passengers will repeat back to us. It's together as one. We say that right before we do anything. As a crew member, our culture as a crew is team oriented. We have a saying, as a crew, out of many, we are one. So I send high praise to our leadership team for building this team-oriented culture that truly reflects to our passengers as well. Because if we are operating as one, so too our passengers will throughout this adventure. And what I love most about it is one of our executive producers and our executive creative director, Ann Morrow Johnson, once said, Star Wars is all about these moments of epic action and adventure, but also about these very quiet moments of true human interaction. And what I loved about my time, especially in my followership course, was learning about the moments of empathy, of compassion, and moral courage, where the choices you make as a follower have impact. I see that aboard the Starcruiser. I actually just spoke with a 10-year-old during his voyage about honoring the trust you are given from someone and having empathy and moral courage. And I had to take this moment after that conversation. I was like, wow, I'm getting paid to do this right now. But that's leadership, that's followership. It's those moments of empathy, of compassion, of moral courage, and understanding the choices you make have impact. And that is truly embedded in the experience. And I'm seeing it in every single second that I am on ship, every single engagement that I have with passengers. It's coming back to those core elements.
Beautiful, beautifully described. Thank you so much for sharing that. Mm-hmm. And I also just want to highlight the fact that you're naming choice in the followership role, right, as well as a leadership role, because I think that's a little bit of something we need to get over, culturally, that we need to remember that it's not only those in leadership roles that make choices, it's also those in followership roles. They're just different choices, but they're equally as consequential and therefore equally as influential to the group experience. So thank you for highlighting that. Listeners, book your voyage now. If you want to experience this leader-follower team as one.
And I want to actually jump back to the naming of the leader-follower. What I also really appreciated too was sometimes it's just observing the behaviors of a leader, the behaviors of a follower. And that's what we really see on the experience. And that's also something that I picked up both from your book, but also during my followership courses. The naming of a leader, the naming of a follower is so important, but just so too, it's the understanding the behaviors of a leader, the behaviors of a follower, seeing that really emerge. And I saw that a lot during my experience at Christopher Newport and my experiences both in the program and beyond the program. It was often sometimes so hard to figure out whether or not I should call myself a leader in this situation or should I call myself a follower in this situation. And that's where I really leaned on, okay, we are all on the same page. We're all in the same room. Let's explore what these behaviors look like to ensure that there is that co-flow that can exist.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. Do you have any memories of identifying which behaviors those are and how they go together? Because I agree with you. The labels leadership and followership, they're kind of useful as scaffolding. They're not like the end goal. It's almost like point the sign in that direction so that we can get to the point at which we're behaving or interacting, fluidly as one.
Absolutely. I had the opportunity to work as a student director of orientation at Christopher Newport. And this was during the year 2020. So we signed on before the pandemic happened. We had our roles, we had our set roles, we had our set expectations. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and then we shifted remotely. So with that, we had to embrace, not we had to, I like to say we wanted to, because we truly wanted to embrace a whole new mindset for how we did onboarding. Specifically, we needed to figure out how to honor what our incoming students have lost, but prepare them with excitement, more importantly, curiosity for what was to come. So when the pandemic happened, my boss's responsibilities shifted. And our peer student advisor opportunity, my role elevated to where I was partnering with her and fellow student director to form 10 weeks of virtual orientation content. In addition, training 31 orientation leaders to host in total nearly 1,800 meetups, what we call crew times, while supporting the mental well-being of our team during 2020. And so in that space, I was working with my leader, where I assumed the role as a follower. But then when the pandemic happened, we shifted to this level of where we were working together, where it was this constant think tank, if you will, of, okay, like, what if we do it like this? Okay, what about this? And then I would shift over to working with our orientation leaders. Our orientation leaders, I was working hand in hand with them, where they were informing some of the content that we were giving to our students. In addition to, they were informing some of our training experiences as well. So it was this really cool, really unique opportunity seeing how this hierarchy shifted into this level playing field where everyone was contributing and everyone was receiving at the same time.
Yeah, I think that experience you had, I've heard echoed from others during that dramatic transition to everything online, that there's something about the remote experience. I wouldn't say flattens the hierarchy, because that sort of sounds like, wow, like it's gone,
yes.
but it makes it somehow, it makes the role somehow more fluid.
More relational.
And that can be disorienting, I think, for a lot of folks, right? As you said, it's sometimes hard to tell, like, what role am I in? But I think that word receiving, you mentioned language is so useful. And often I think of receiving if I'm in the follower role, even if it's just in a conversation, right? For a few moments, and then I'm speaking and then the other person's receiving. So I can imagine you amidst all of those roles, right? With your supervisor, with the trainers, I can't remember all of the titles, the people you're working with, but where, there is kind of now the need for data to come in from more directions than before, perhaps because of the dramatic change in context, as Kellerman might say. So making yourself open to receive, and perhaps, everyone in that chain or of that network of organizing, perhaps, I'm speculating now, but you tell me if this feels like it was true, needed to have more input, right? More kind of openness to receive. So in a sense, more followership or more frequent followership to take in more in order to be able to make good leadership decisions, right? In terms of directing or coordinating or space holding. But to tell me how you think about that.
I absolutely would agree with that, especially in terms of the increased frequency of followership needed during that time. As a leader, we were setting the frame for our orientation leaders, but transitioning to a follower, I was encouraging our followers to set that frame as well. So it was this unique, as you referred to it, it was this unique dance where that increased frequency of followership was almost more needed too than the leadership, because it was the followers that they were working directly with our students. They were the ones interacting with them. They were the ones hearing the stories. They were the ones hearing what our students exactly needed. So we really relied on increasing that frequency of conversation, of feedback. That was very important to our experience. Most importantly for me too, shifting away from that leader role into that follower role, especially in terms of how can I support my boss, my director of orientation, a time of which she assumed more responsibility, and how can I still accomplish those goals while still supporting our orientation leader crew.
I think what you're describing is just a great lesson for all of us for the future. Because I mean, hopefully there isn't going to be another dramatic pandemic, let's put that out there. But I think more change is coming for us in the future, right? Change is always coming, but it feels like we're in a moment of like just more and more rapid change, technologically, globally, economically. And the lesson I'm hearing from this experience you had was more followership, and like more frequent followership by all then actually allows more leadership too, like more distributed leadership perhaps, right? As you're kind of passing that off to the orientation leaders, right? Say, okay, I've listening, I'm receiving information from you. Now you go back and, make the decision and hold the frame for others. So more like circulation, perhaps, of these roles back and forth. So, when we recognize everyone kind of amped up their followership in terms of receiving information, it allowed them to take on that bigger responsibility of frame setting as a leader. That's what I'm getting from it. And I feel like could be a really powerful lesson for all of us as we go forth, through this next decade, anticipating all kinds of changes coming.
And I think too, something that I really leaned into was trusting that my orientation leaders would leave our spaces as a crew and go to their students and be their best selves. That's what I hope I got across to them during that time, was be you and be well. Be you and do well. Be your best self is what I really wanted to settle on with our orientation leaders, of take this information, but I trust that you have the capacity to be your best self and to do what you need to do to ensure that you're taking care of yourself, but also that we are supporting our students through this challenging experience. And throughout that entire experience, I literally had a library right next to where my remote working station was, of all of the texts, of all of the knowledge that I received from the program. The amount of times that I would pull, especially books on followership, to understand it, to understand how to mobilize a group during this time of collective stress, anxiety, overwhelmness, if that is a word, how to support and how to empathize and to how to inspire and motivate. And that is something that I am so grateful for, especially from the curriculum, because of how interdisciplinary it was and how much it brought certainty to such an ambiguous time.
Beautiful. Yeah. Wow. What a powerful takeaway. Anything else, Lawson, coming to mind that, has kind of come out of this interdisciplinary program between leadership and followership, or both, that you wanted to share?
I think a powerful takeaway from the program, especially the interdisciplinary nature of it all, is, and including my role right now, is storytelling and play have purpose in leadership and followership. In fact, actually, one of our courses offered in the President's Leadership Program and through our leadership studies major and minor, we have a storytelling course where we explore storytelling as a form of leadership, as a form of followership. And when I really reflect on storytelling and play having purpose in leadership and followership, I actually think back to your previous podcast episode, Lightness and Play, where Tova so eloquently states that trust is what enables play to happen. And so from that, I think another big takeaway is trust. You need to invest in relationships and building trust when it comes to the leader-follower dynamic. That is the foundation that can truly set yourself up for success, for an effective partnership, for an effective dance.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you mentioned Tova's episode. It's one of my favorite episodes.
Oh, yes, it was fantastic.
And listeners should all go and listen to it if you haven't. She's delightful. Yeah. I love that you brought in storytelling. And this might be a tricky question, but I'm curious if you experience storytelling differently when you're in the leading role or in the following role. Like, does it serve your purposes differently in either of those roles?
Yes, I think it's a difference between telling a story and listening to a story, where I have the opportunity to practice communicating effectively as a leader by storytelling, and as a follower, actively listening. Some of the most powerful stories I've experienced are co-created. So bringing in that dynamic of, as a leader, I am also actively listening while I am effectively communicating. And as a follower, I am effectively communicating as I'm actively listening.
Yeah, thank you. Your description made me think of stories that I've heard or told. And tell me if you agree with this or if you experience it differently. But I noticed that when I'm telling a story, I will actually tell it differently depending on who's listening. And I think that's another one of these subtle things that can kind of go unnoticed, that the listener, just by their presence, the way that they're listening, the way they tune in or don't tune in, that impacts my choices, right, as a leader, and what I communicate and how much I trust to share and so forth. So I don't know, that was sort of the subtle layer that I wanted to bring in. I wonder if you experience that or if you experience it differently.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back to that trust. If there's different levels of trust, you're going to get that different level of storytelling, that different level of vulnerability. Storytelling is an inherent vulnerable activity, I think. And my storytelling absolutely does shift between a more organic storytelling versus storytelling in the sense of a firm script, if you will, or a firm spiel.
Right.
And absolutely, it's very much about when you captivate the audience, when we talk about a leadership guiding principle, it's very much about understanding your audience. I think that is so important. As a leader, it's understanding the audience. And as a follower, it's understanding who you are in that space too. And the leader taking active steps to understand in order to make sure that that story they are telling is relevant and, most importantly, hopefully inspires.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautiful. I think it's so easy for us to kind of, again, that cultural stereotype, right? That you kind of just, as a leader, like put your story out there and put it on people and, they're just passively receiving it. But, that's really not good storytelling, I think. The good storytelling is the leader or the storyteller who is adjusting for the audience and who is kind of choosing those words depending on who their listener is and what kind of presence they're receiving. So thanks for underlying that. I'm hoping that we'll have listeners who might be current students of leadership at other universities. I wonder if you have any thoughts for them or advice for them as they're going through their own learning journey.
Absolutely. I think first and foremost that the followership leadership role, it's shared, equal, and dynamic. I would encourage to learn followership, to understand followership, to study followership just as much as you are, if not more, studying leadership. I think something that I've really kind of been curious about is how to make myself indispensable in a workspace. And I say that lightly because it sounds almost like a commodity of like when you leave, like you're just, that number in a system. But it's when I say indispensable, I'm saying how to make yourself the first person a leader or someone calls on, how to make yourself reliable. How can you make yourself responsible? How can you make yourself be that person someone looks to? And I think a key to that is understanding followership. You talk about in Lead and Follow, preserving the ethics, helping develop ideas, practicing calmness and composure, checking in with those beside me and above me in a structure. I think that's how I've kind of settled on. I'm asking the same questions of my leaders that I do my fellow crew members. Like, how are you going to take care of yourself when you head back home? Or how are you feeling today? Those simple questions facilitate a sense of trust that I care about you because I do, because I see you as a person. I care about you as a person. And I think care is so incredibly important in the followership leadership dynamic, that respect. And so I think understanding followership can truly help make one indispensable in a workspace.
Beautiful. I think that's the title of the episode, Make Yourself Indispensable.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a powerful note to end on. And Lawson, I so appreciate your perspective as one who's gone through this really unique program and now is taking it out into the world. You're just such a glowing example of what happens when we do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
You have been listening to the Lead and Follow podcast. Special thanks to Glover Gill for composing our music. And a huge thank you to all of you who support the show. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or consider joining the Lead and Follow fan club for as little as $3 a month. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes.